I knew the body innately heals. It can't not.
A pocket of energy within myself.
This is for your mother. So just do this for her.
Let's figure out ways that we can actually use pleasure to come together and bring healing.
It's a modality where we go into your subconscious and change some of those limiting beliefs.
I'm Susan Marco, clinical hypnotist, and I have so many friends and people who have had big impact on my life, so I want to share them all with you. Hi, everybody. Susan Marco here, and welcome to Trance Talks, where we have conversations with practitioners across many different alternative modalities and disciplines. And today, I'm so happy to have this lovely lady sitting with me. We actually have just met, and I am so happy to meet you, Jill, and I'm so inspired by the work that you do. Jill is a certified death doula. And if you haven't heard about that, or you don't know what that is, hold on to your hat, because she's going to tell you all about it. It is a beautiful, beautiful method of working with people at the end of their lives. She also adds into her death doula training that she is a trauma-sensitive yoga instructor and incorporates reiki and shamanic healing to help her clients, deal with issues like death and the dying process, and even navigating through their grief. And if that isn't enough, she also has her own podcast, which I'll let her tell you about, later in the conversation. But I really want to give you the microphone, Jill, and ask you to please explain to my listeners, what is a death doula? How did you get to that point to become that?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here and excited to have this conversation. And I know the term death doula is probably new to a lot of people. It is work, though, that has been done really since humans existed. We had typically women that lived in communities that would help people that were having babies. They would help people that were sick. They would help people that were dying. And just in the last, 100 years or so, we've really gotten away from that type of community support, that type of support of having somebody navigating these transitions in our life. And so when I heard about a death doula, I had already cared for my grandmother at the end of her life. I had moved to California. Actually, when I left New Jersey the first time, I left at 18, swore I was never coming back. I went away to college. I went to culinary school, met my husband now. He was not my husband then, but we moved to California. We decided we wanted to open a bakery together because we were both pastry chefs. And my grandmother was getting ready to turn 90. She lived in the same home that my grandfather built for her when they got married in the 40s. It was the second place she'd ever lived in her life. And she really wanted to stay there for the remainder of her life. And so she said, move home with me. You could live here rent free, and that'll keep me in my house. And then you could open your bakery, Philadelphia, wherever you want to open it. And so my husband came home with me. I brought him home to New Jersey, and we lived with my grandmother for the last 4 years of her life. And during that time, she got diagnosed with cancer. So we went through the different treatments and surgeries and all of these things that, looking back on it now, knowing what I know, we maybe would have made different decisions, but we didn't know better, right? We just were going with what the doctors recommended without knowing what questions to ask. The last 3 weeks of her life when she was on hospice, I was living with her, so I was taking care of her. And I thought, okay, grandma's just going to sleep a lot, because that's what you see in movies, right? People go to sleep, they're just resting peacefully, like all of these things. And that was not the experience that I had. And hospice, I really cannot say enough about hospice and how amazing they are, because those nurses came in and I was exhausted and overwhelmed and practically in tears, saying, I don't understand. She doesn't know who I am. She was up all night. She thought I was trying to kill her. Like, what is going on? And they were so lovely and they were so supportive. And while they're doing what they needed to do for my grandmother, they answered any and every question that I had. And I had a lot. I just chatted their ear off the entire time. And once I started to understand the process, once I started to understand that these things were normal and they were natural for people that are nearing the end of life, then I started to relax and I started to just get more curious and having more conversations with her, asking her questions. So when she's up at 2 o'clock in the morning and she's saying to me, "You don't see those women standing behind you singing?" And I'm looking around thinking, I don't see anybody. Rather than getting scared and upset or saying, "There's nobody there," I said, "Oh, well, tell me about them. What do they look like? What are they wearing? What are they singing?" Like, I wanted to know all about it. But it really took me feeling that I understood what was happening to be able to get to that level of comfort. So that by the time that she did die, I really felt like, especially those last 3 weeks, but even the last 4 years that I was with her, was really a gift. It was a gift for me and it was a gift for her.
Mm.
And at that point, I had a 6-month-old baby. I had a bakery. I said to my husband, "I think I want to go back to school and I want to be a hospice nurse." And he said, "All right, whatever you want to do. Like, if that's what you want, go ahead." But realistically, I realized that was not the right time. I thought, okay, well, we got the baby, we got the bakery. Maybe in a few years I'll do it. And life happens, right? And so we ended up having another child. We closed our bakery. We both got jobs. We moved. Things just kept moving. And so when I heard the term in 2019, my grandmother died in 2011. So in 2019, I heard the term death doula. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh, that's the thing. That's what I want to do. Because what death doulas do is provide a similar level of support that hospice does, in the sense of the emotional, the spiritual, the holistic type of support without the medical care. So we're not giving any medications, we're not checking vital signs, we're not doing those parts of what hospice does, but we're there to support the person who's dying as well as their family members. Depends on the doula. Some doulas will work with family members, some will not. It just depends on people's comfort levels and what they want to kind of focus on. But for me, I will support the person that's dying and their family members. And again, it's more holistic. So it's mind, body, and soul. So I will work closely with people, ideally earlier on, right? I don't want to wait until it's the last 3 weeks of somebody's life and they can't communicate with me. I would prefer to work with people earlier on so that I can get a sense of who they are, what's important to them, what fears do they have, what anxieties do they have, what do they believe is going to happen after they die? What are their spiritual beliefs? Are they religious? Are they not religious? I want to really get to know the person and what's important, so that when we get to really the end of life, what sometimes they would refer to as like the active dying phase, especially the last few hours up to maybe even a couple days, I can really support that person and their family through that process of really laboring to get to death, right? Just like we labor to have babies, we labor to get to death. The physical body goes through a process. And it's really beautiful work that I feel so honored that people invite me into such an intimate, vulnerable space with them. Because I know that this is really, it's sacred work in a lot of ways. And it's definitely not going to be for everybody. I know a lot of people listening are probably going, "I'm glad she does it, but I never could." But also, all of us are going to have to do this at some point, whether it's our own death or the death of a loved one. And so that's why death doulas can really come in and help people understand, again, what's going to happen. What questions do you need to ask? Let me explain what will happen so that it's normalized and then you don't feel so stressed and anxious. And if I could have the conversation with the person that is nearing death and with their family about what's important to them, then there's no questions when a doctor maybe comes in and says, all right, your person needs to be intubated. And if we don't intubate them, they will die.
Mm.
And people are like, I don't know, what should I do? We never had this conversation. I don't even know what intubation is.
Mm.
It's like all of those things that death doulas are there to just help guide people. And that's why sometimes I'll say to people, I'm more of like an end of life coach, because I feel like a lot of people understand life coaching. And I'm like, well, I do similar work just at the end of life, right? It's not counseling. It's not like I'm just going to sit there and listen to people. It is more, if people are interested in Reiki, if people are interested in the shamanic healing, if people are interested in movement, I want to do all of those things with somebody so that it's more of, let's help people heal before they die and not wait until they're like right at that end point. And then they're holding on to life because they're saying, I have all this unfinished business. I have all this fear. I have all this anxiety. I want to say these things to people and now I can't say them. And so they can't let go. Well, why don't we work on it now so that you can let go a little bit easier when it is time? That's the goal, hopefully.
I love that. The whole notion of healing and clearing whatever needs to be cleared so that you can go in a more, resolved, peaceful way.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, I know that most of us have had the experience of, losing a loved one, and it's not so peaceful, and it maybe isn't so graceful. Right. So what you do is so, and you said the word sacred before. I wanted to jump in and say it's sacred. It's sacred. It really is. It's so beautiful that you can be with people in that way. Is there, so I have a couple of questions. So I have
Yes,
logistical
please.
questions about how you work with people, but what do you think is the like your magic sauce to be able to be present and hold a space for someone through a period that is so emotionally charged and sad?
And it is sad, no matter how okay we are with death and dying, when somebody that we love is dying, it's sad.
Mhm.
We can't escape that part. And for me, a lot of it is having my own personal practices. I do practice movement every day. It's kind of yoga-ish. I don't really do the strict yoga like I was originally taught anymore in my own practice. It's more like free flowing, just kind of movement. But I do move my body every day. I do meditate. I sit down at least 10 minutes every morning and I meditate to kind of ground myself, to try as best as I can to clear my mind, which there's never any total clearing of the mind, but just to kind of sit and ground myself. I will do shamanic journeying as well. When I took my training to learn how to work with others, it of course was also teaching us how to do these things on our own. So every once in a while, I'll have a very specific, like, I need to clear this person. I need to clear this energy. I need to clear this thing. A lot of times I'll find working with clients touches on something in me, some grief or some sadness or some pain that I just hadn't dealt with yet. Especially if I talk to people that have lost children, that's a really sensitive place, I guess you'd say, for me. So that's when I actually find shamanic, journeying, shamanic healing on myself can be really helpful to kind of help get me in a space so that when I am sitting with people, I'm really practicing that idea of holding the space for them to feel what they need to feel, to express what they need to express without asking questions that are biased based off of my beliefs, without trying to input my beliefs, without steering them one direction or another. Like, I know personally, there's a lot of medical treatments that now that I know about it, I would not have put my grandmother through. right? And again, it was still her choice. But now that I know what I know, at 90 years old, would I have asked different questions and maybe said to her, we probably don't want to do those things? Yes, that's what I would do personally. But if I'm working with a client, as long as they understand the information, they could make whatever decision they want. I just want to empower them with the knowledge for them to make an informed decision. And even if it's not the decision I would make, I'm not going to make a face about it. I'm not going to try to tell them to do something else. And it's funny because so many times I've sat with people, whether it's 15 minutes, whether it's 3 hours, and I ask a couple questions. And then at the end, they'll say, oh, you're so wise. You're so knowledgeable. You're so helpful, all these things. And I'm thinking, I barely said anything. What I did was allow you to openly talk about what you're afraid of, what you're feeling, what you want, without trying to interject. And it's really just this interesting space of, when they talk about maybe like active listening, sometimes I think they'll call it that. And it really is just sitting, listening, asking a few questions to help people get clear. And then again, maybe if we're talking about different medical treatments or talking about what will happen at the end of life, then I will give the knowledge that I have, but it's without the intention of influencing somebody's decision. But it really does start with me coming into this space, feeling grounded, feeling present, feeling good in my own energy and in my own space, because it is, again, it can be sad. And there are things that I need to make sure that I really understand that this is not me. This is not personal. If anything, I am being invited into this space to help them and to witness. It's not about me. And so as long as I can kind of keep those things up, then it's not that it's easy to do it, because it is still emotional. I mean, I will still cry sometimes. I'm not sobbing and like losing control, but there's times when I get tears to my eyes when I talk to people, and that's also okay. Understanding too that that is okay. It's okay for me to show some emotions. I don't need to hide it and keep it like I need to be professional and, do all these things. Like, it's okay to show some emotions with people when it is something that is an emotional conversation to have.
I love what you said earlier, though, also about, and I think, I would say to people who ask me, how do you know who to work with? Like, how do you know who is the good, how do you discern between a practitioner that you want to work with? And something that you said about that, it's almost like what I heard you say is that there's an opportunity for you in every person that you work with, because it helps you to heal and to bring up whatever is there for you that needs to be resolved. So it is that personal give or take, or that sort of personal connection that you have with your clients. I think that is absolutely beautiful. And if and when I ever need your services, I would call you in a minute.
Well, thank you.
Call
I
you in a
appreciate
heartbeat.
that.
Yeah. When you work with people, how does it, like, well, logistically, how often do you work with someone? What does it look like?
It definitely depends on the person. I mean, that's the beauty of having this be my own business, not working for a company, is that I really can personalize the service depending on what somebody needs.
Mm-hmm.
And because I work with a range of, it can be before somebody is really sick, right? Maybe they got a diagnosis. We're going to just plan for what is to come. It can be, I was just told I have only 6 months left to live. What do I do with the rest of this time? It can even be with people that are grieving. So the death has already happened. They're not sure how to process the grief, right? So I work with people kind of in a range of everything that has to do with end of life, death, dying, and grief. And I will work with clients almost like 1 hour session, let's meet once a week. I have a client that I've been meeting with every 3 months for about 2 years, because they're navigating the death of a grandparent, right? That like the grandparent got the diagnosis. Now they're actually living longer than planned, which is great, right? But it's still going to happen. And so we're working through the fears and the anxieties and like preparing for that. But we meet only, occasionally just to kind of keep supporting. But then what happens is then as we get closer to death, I have different packages that I've kind of created to offer people so that it's a little bit less like, all right, we meet for an hour every week. It's more like, all right, when do you need me? What do you need me for? Call me, text me, whatever it is. I even do offer the service that if your loved one is actively dying and it's, the last couple of days, I'll offer 24-hour text service. So I will keep my phone on so that you can reach me at any time, because again, a lot of times the time that you need the help the most is at like 2 o'clock in the morning. You're not going to reach anybody from hospice at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
But as long as I know that this is what's happening, that we're at that stage, then you can reach me at 2 o'clock in the morning to say, hey, I'm scared, I'm confused, I don't know what's going on, their breathing is weird, they're talking to people, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really try to make it so that whatever support somebody needs at whatever phase they are in the process, that's the support that I can give them. And again, it's interesting because some people that I talk to have no interest at all in like, the more like quote unquote woo part of it, the Reiki, the shamanic healing, the movement. It's more like, I just need somebody to go through some paperwork with me. Let's get this all written out. I want to have a conversation with my family. We need to move furniture. Let's rearrange the room so that the hospital bed can come in and things are, so there's the very practical side. And then there's the other side of it where some people are like, no, I really think I need some, maybe shamanic journeying to work through some things. I need some guided meditations. I need some movement, especially with grief. I find that the movement is really, really helpful with grief because we hold it in our bodies. We've actually probably been holding a lot of grief in our bodies from childhood, right? From death of pets, death of grandparents, losses of friendships. I mean, how many of us lost our best friend when we were a teenager and we're still sad about it? Ending of relationships, ending of jobs. There's so many endings that we do not grieve properly. So we hold all of that inside. And then what happens when a big death happens? Somebody, our parent, our spouse, God forbid, our child, when those big deaths happen, all of that grief wants to come up because we can't hold it down anymore. It's kind of like we cracked it open a little bit and it's like, hey, I'm still here. And so with movement, I find it allows people to feel that they can physically move it out of their body. And it gives us this space to say, we're going to work with the grief for a set amount of time. So that this way, you're not going to feel like you're going to get swallowed up by it, because that's the fear that so many people have. If I open up this grief, I'm going to be overwhelmed. I'm going to get lost in it. And we can't control when grief gets triggered for us. So I also create, plans for people of, for example, there was one person that I worked with that their mother died suddenly while they were home from break in college. So they had to go back to college and have people say, how was your break? And they have to say, my mother died, actually. Like, how do you navigate that? So together we created a plan. When this happens, when you feel like you're going to get overwhelmed by the grief, go into the bathroom, go somewhere alone, do some exercises with your hands, opening and closing your hands, shaking your hands, take a couple of deep breaths, close your eyes. Just don't shove it down, but also kind of contain it a little bit. And then when you get home, you have this ritual that you're going to do. You're going to sit down, you're going to light a candle, you're going to get out your journal, you're going to journal it out. Then you'll do a little bit of movement, turn on some music, they like to dance, right? Fine, cool. It doesn't have to be yoga. It doesn't have to be like this very, I consider a lot of times people think of yoga as like this like really spiritual kind of thing. Like dancing could be just as spiritual. Like
Absolutely.
turn on the music, dance it out, but just don't try to shove it down. Contain it until you can get to a safe space to allow yourself. And again, set a timer. Don't just open it up and be like, oh my gosh, now it's going to be 3 hours of me sobbing on the floor. And maybe it is, and that's okay too. But if you say, hey, you know what, I'm going to set a timer, it's going to be 30 minutes and I'm going to journal and I'm going to cry and I'm going to move and then I'm going to take a shower or a bath. And then when we have that plan in place, we're so much better prepared for the grief process, because we can't control the grief process. We can't rush through it. We can't avoid it. But what we can do is work with our bodies and the grieving process in a natural way that helps us feel like we can still function in the world and not get swallowed up and lost in it.
Yeah. So beautiful. You work with people in person and virtually, correct?
I do. Yes. I work with people in person and virtually because I did discover really most of the work that I do, I can do it virtually, because even, at first I thought when I did my doula training, I was like, I'm going to sit with people as they're actively dying and we're going to hold hands and all that. And like, yes, I do some of that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found is most people have a good support system already. They have a spouse, they have children, they have friends, they have people around that if I can just help them get to a place where they understand and where they're comfortable, they don't actually need me there. That can be them. That could be them alone together. Again, with my support, if you need to call me, if you need to text me, fine. But also most people, once I kind of explain what's going to happen and we plan for it and we set everything up, they don't actually physically need me there for that final moment, because they're ready for it. They're prepared for it. They feel comfortable. And so I can do all of that with anybody, anywhere in the world, which again, wasn't necessarily what I planned, but I'm finding it actually works really well.
So beautiful. I really, I just want to say thank you for doing this work, Jill, because it's, this already. This is not the type of work that just anybody can jump into. It really takes a particular energy and a particular maybe calling or passion or, whatever drives you toward that. So I really thank you. And I honor you for doing this work. And you are in New Jersey. I just want to mention that. So if anyone local, around here, just so you know, she's around. She's not local to the Jersey Shore, but certainly Jersey is not that big. So
Yeah.
If people wanted to contact you, what would be the best way for them to get to you?
Yeah, well, my business is End of Life Clarity. So that's my website, that's my Facebook, my Instagram, my TikTok, right? All the social medias. So you can easily find me on social media. My website has a lot of resources. I have a link to my podcast, which my podcast is actually called Seeing Death Clearly, kind of a play on the name of the business. So that I can really just help people get more comfortable hearing conversations about death and dying. I have blogs that talk about a lot of different topics to just kind of get people started thinking about these things and talking about these things. I have some free resources, of course, that people can sign up for and get. And it's really, email is always a great way to reach me. There is a link on the website, but it's just Jill at End of Life Clarity, which I'm sure you could put a link so people don't even have to try to write it down.
So yeah, we'll
I
put
know
all that
that's-
in the
yeah.
show notes for everybody.
Exactly. That's always the hard part. I'm like, I'm not going to spell it out, but you'll get it. But really, even social media, reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram or any of them. And like I said, I do try to post resources and I try to have conversations with people on my podcast to make it so that hearing about death and dying and grief is not overwhelming. It's not scary. It's not heavy. It's just part of life. And the more that we can normalize hearing it and talking about it, the easier it will be for all of us, because we're all going to get there one day.
It's so true. It's inevitable.
It is.
Yeah. So thank you again. Thank you for what you're doing and for taking the time to come and chat with me and our listeners. And have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you. And I appreciate you giving me the space to talk about it. I love to talk. So thank you so much.
Yeah.